Happy Bitcoin Friday, freaks. It's your host, ODELL, here for another Citadel Dispatch, the interactive live show focused on actionable freedom tech and Bitcoin discussion. As always, I want to thank the many individuals in our audience who continue to support the show using Bitcoin. Citadel Dispatch has no ads or sponsors. It is supported purely from Bitcoin donations from our audience. So to all those who continue to support the show, thank you. I appreciate you. The easiest way to support Dispatch is through podcasting 2.0 apps like Fountain, Podverse.fm, Breeze Wallet. You simply install the app like any other podcast app, choose how many sats per minute, how much Bitcoin per minute you think the show is worth, and that Bitcoin streams directly to my wallet. You can also do something called boostergrams, where you attach a message to an amount of sats. And the top 4 boostergrams I read out from last week's episode. We have at Cumrocket with 69,420 sats saying, do the Bitcoin, stay humble, and stack sats. Appreciate it. We have at random user with 55,555 sats saying, what's the episode referenced in the Adam and Jack episode with the Silk Road dude who did jail time? Search TFTC John Doe for that. We have at Eric99 with 50,000 sats saying stay humble, stack sats. Thank you, Eric99. Great advice. And we have at 8mythrender with 7,777 sats saying, I think 10 more Noster podcasts and I might give it a go. Well, there's going to be a lot more Noster focus going forward. We also have a new live chat and a new Noster stream that you can access by going to citadeldispatch.com/stream. That uses your Noster NPub to sign in, and you can zap sats. You can send Bitcoin transactions directly in the chat. So cheers to the freaks joining us for that. And then last but not least, I know it's a bear market. I know it's a recession. The easiest way to support the show is subscribing and leaving a review and listening through your favorite platform. Dispatch is available on all the major platforms: YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Bitcoin TV, every podcast app. You just search Citadel Dispatch on that favorite platform. And it's important to remind everyone, if you're not listening to this live, that Dispatch is always broadcast live as a live interactive show. We have a live chat on YouTube that is streamed directly into the broadcast. And as I said earlier, now we have this Noster chat at citadeldispatch.com/stream. So thank you to the guests. Thank you to the audience members who continuously show up for the live shows and make it unique with your comments and your questions. Couldn't do without you. So anyway, that's my intro. This is a great conversation that I'm very excited about. I'm really looking forward to it. We have a really good friend joining us. We have Russell Okung, former, I guess, forever Super Bowl champion, Bitcoiner, joining us today after a 40-day fast. Russell, how's it going?
I'd first like to say that I'm changed, man. And I don't think I'll ever be the same. And then, I've been on my knees praying since 3 a.m. this morning for this audience. So for every person who decides to listen and to share the time with us, okay, I'm praying for you. I'm praying for those who are in the know and who are walking in truth, or essentially seeing the world through a different lens. I pray for you. I pray for those who feel misunderstood and not heard. I'm lifting you up. So I'd first like to give our praise and honor to the Most High God, the God of Ibrahim. And I say to all those who are listening, in the tongue of my forefathers, Nkomo, Begala Salam, grace and peace unto you. So, Matt, thank you so much for having me on, brother.
Thank you for coming on, and thank you for everything you do and what you stand for. And thank you for being a friend. I don't know where we should really start. The ball's in your court. You just completed a 40-day fast. Before that, I mean, before the 40-day fast, you did something that I have a ton of respect for, which is you spent a large portion of your life in the public eye, um, and you just stepped away. You just stepped away, you stepped into into, I guess, a greater focus into family life and priorities and getting your life in order. Um, let's talk about that for a little bit. When did that happen? Was that over a year ago?
Yeah, yeah, it was over a year ago, and actually less than a year ago. Um, it's it was since I've been 10 years old, man. I've had people, watching me, right, and shouting praise and affirming me, and I've always, you know, it's become a large part of who I am, right, in terms of performing for society or in the public eye. But after my last season with the Carolina Panthers, I was just taking a hard look into the mirror, looking at my family, my children, and trying to figure out like who's the man I want to be. I've always kind of been preparing for transition in some ways out of the NFL, but you kind of really never know when it's going to come. And you have people that just kind of it this abruptly happens to, and you have some people who can decide when they want to leave, and then you have others who are forced out of the game. And I just was looking in the mirror. And I knew it was becoming increasingly hard to get up every morning. Like my body was in pain. I was, just trying to figure out what was next to Carolina. Teams were calling me. They wanted to sign me. They're offering me money. I'm just like, I was having issues with my wife, and I couldn't emotionally connect with my wife and my children and my family. And I just knew something needed to change. All right, so that's ultimately what drove me to the fast. Is it wasn't some desire for weight loss, as most people would proclaim. It was a desire to be a better son, a better husband, a better father, a better person. Like I wanted that, right? I wanted to be a better leader. I know there are a lot of people who look to me, who are depending on me. So I had to just cut down everything and focus. That same skill I've had in achieving these feats in the professional football field, I wasn't doing that same thing with my family, with my loved ones, those who are closest to me. And so I just took that same energy and that effort and I reoriented it. I redirected it to them. And I got to tell you, Matt, it has been the best thing I've ever done. The best thing I've ever done.
It's inspiring. It's inspiring, my dude. I I mean, let's talk about that. So, I mean, the headlines would have you believe that it was all about weight loss.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, it's a crazy number. What is the number? I guess I should know it. I'm the host. But the number is insane how much weight you lost.
Yes, I
Um,
was I was 330 pounds, after I finished with Carolina and going up 330 pounds. So that's when I did my first fast, and then this more recent one, I lost roughly 50 to 60 pounds.
I mean, I saw a number 190. Was that an accurate number or was that bullshit?
I you know what, I still can't believe it, but like it's an accurate number. About 192, I believe.
Oh wow, that's insane. I mean, you lost like a whole person worth of weight.
Man, I haven't been that light since 8th grade.
Um, okay, but it wasn't about weight loss at all.
No, not at all. Nah, man, it's about all the things that I mentioned. And I think, you know, since I've had more of this time to myself and I don't have all of these demands, I've really, been getting into history more, and I've been tapping into some of my family's practices. I went to Africa, I'm in the bush, I'm in the village, and I'm seeing and remembering, right, our cultures and belief system. And fasting has always been a very intrinsic part of the culture I come from. Like I was a child and I remember, my family dry fasting, no water, no food, right? Just so determined, right, to see their lives change. And it was crazy, if not insane, that I found myself at that same chasm. And I said, okay, I want to do this for myself. So I think, like, in the very essence of fasting, right, it suggests that things are not well, right? Well, particularly fasting in this way, right? That if you see fasting as a fundamental component, right, of our culture, of our existence, right, to refrain from it, right, especially when it's in the natural order of life, it implies that one is looking for disruption. You're looking for disruption, right? And I guess in some ways I was reflecting on the chaotic state of affairs of the world, right? And I wanted to look in that mirror, and fasting is interesting because it kind of brings out the deepest things in you. And I noticed, right, it almost intensified, what I think was laying dormant. So I was experiencing crazy highs of sorrow and abnormality. Right, I was being confronted with all of these raw emotions, right, and the tragedy, of things that I've gone through in life that I just kind of pushed aside, not even tried to think about. Right, and the best thing about it though was I witnessed the fragility of my life. Right, that my life can be gone at any moment in time. Right, and it's been beautiful because I've emerged with newfound strength, with resilience, and I think it's a practice which is completely underestimated, right? Particularly in a culture which is obsessed with consumption.
Yep.
I can talk too much, so feel free to cut me off.
No, I'm just gonna let you run for as until you realize that I'm letting you run, and then I'm gonna jump in. That's my strategy. It was almost a reset, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's you know, I think I was living in pain for so long. You kind of think it's your best friend. You almost expect things it to be this way. You're like, okay, this hurts, or I'm dealing with this ailment or this sickness, and you just figure for whatever reason this is just how life is supposed to be, right? You normalize it, and I think that is one of the most dangerous things you can do. And look, I'm not a medical professional. I just want to preface anything I say that it's not what I do for a living, right? So I put myself out there twice now, and I've learned that this is a historical ancient practice that's pretty prevalent in many other cultures, just not in the West.
Yeah, I mean, Russ, I mean, I can relate to the fact that our society is unfortunately incredibly focused on consumption.
Mhm.
Um, this conversation is mostly going to be me relating to you as a friend because I have zero qualifications to talk about fasting or even spirit, like of finding your spirituality. I don't. I try, but I'm definitely by no means well versed. I'm still learning on my side. Um, when when you think about, I guess I don't even know where I want to go with this. Okay, so 40-day fast. We went through a 40-day fast. You went through a 40-day fast. I didn't do shit.
We
Um,
we
we
did.
um, and but you're still not really. I mean, you're not eating solid foods right now, right?
No, no, I'm still drinking just juiced raw fruits and vegetables.
Okay. So how long have you been doing that for? That's been how many days?
So it's a week regimen. So for about a week, it's nothing but raw fruits and vegetables, just juiced, right?
Like,
And
yeah,
I'm pretty careful about like the sort of glycemic index. So I try not to pick fruits that are high in sugar.
right,
So that's like the challenge. And the thing about fasting is like the refeeding procedure is just as important. Like some people just say, okay, well, withdrawal, and then they come back in, they're eating meat.
right.
And like the body can only handle so much. Like when you have depleted yourself, and your body's now eating its own fat reserves, I think trying to you know, impart too much into the body can be very dangerous. But again, right, if we're looking at this from like the lens of seeing it as an ancient practice, just like people hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, didn't have food readily available. Right? You couldn't just choose and say, "I'm gonna eat all this
Right.
today," right? You know,
You know,
so
like
it's
hunt and gather and time would go on while you were in between meals naturally.
seriously, it was a couple of times when I'd be sleeping, for the very little amount of time I would. I mean, every little sound could wake me up, right? I would be chewing in my sleep. it was it was insane. I was like on straight, like fight or flight mode. I could smell everything. Uh, smell like I could be outside and you could smell the trees had a distinct smell. The grass, fruit. I remember like one time somebody from my family was drinking wine. It was very you know it's rich. It was a very rich smell, and I couldn't believe I had tapped in. I feel like I tapped into something.
And I mean, I see a lot of people try and tap into that, um, myself included, by like what's almost become a fad, which is this intermittent fasting, which is, you do much shorter fasts than 40, like incredibly shorter fasts than 40 days. Maybe you skip a meal or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, this is just a whole nother level. 40 days. I mean, longer than 40 days essentially with no solid food. Like I can't even. I do wonder if from a strictly nutrition point of view, if I would die, because I didn't start with so much, muscle and fat that you started with.
Yeah, I think that's something to pay attention to. Right? And I read I don't want you to die. you know, but like like I've read studies, right? There is information in regards to one prepping to fast.
Right.
So whether that is increasing your caloric intake, or fats and proteins, like So if you're saying, hey, I want to fast for X amount of time, like you can prepare yourself to do so, just by taking some things up and I can send you some of them at some point. If not, maybe I'll just put it on Twitter so people can just kind of read it for themselves. But it's I've seen people much leaner than me do it. I've seen people much larger than me do it. And I think it's something that I think requires an understanding of your own uniqueness.
But this is something you think everyone should do at some point?
So I guess so when my family, right, like when I told them I was fasting, like one of my uncles laughed at me. He was like, "Oh yeah, you're fasting?" He said, "How long?" I'm like, 40 days. He's like, "Okay, no problem. We're gonna fast with you." He has a family of like maybe like 6 or 7, right? And like he essentially made a decision, you know, in proxy of his family, to say everybody's fasting, right, for 40 days. Can you imagine that? Like he's just like, and that's how normal it is, right, in the culture I come from, to fast,
Right.
right? And it's like he's much smaller than me, and but to him is just like this is not just an action, right? It's a way of life. It's a lifestyle, right? And I think it's so. I think everybody,
Wait, so did they do it with you?
yes.
They did all 40 days.
Well, I think four of them dropped, and then
Fair.
the last three, which were the oldest ones, stayed on, and they're 70 plus. So two or 70 plus that stayed on, and then one of them was 40, and the other
Wow.
ones ended up dropping.
The young guns let the ball down.
Right. And you know what's crazy is my uncle, he told me, yeah, I'm thinking about doing another 30 days after the 40-day fast. Right? He's like, I'm going to do 70. I'm like, what? Like, you are insane. But
And this is a full fast, right? This is not like a Ramadan fast where you just eat during nights, or this is a full no
oh,
no food,
no food, no electrolytes, no supplementation,
just
no,
water.
just water.
It's incredibly impressive. It's incredibly impressive.
You, you know, it's weird, and I mentioned like the sort of fragility of life earlier. Is I've had people who would ask me, in the middle of the fast, and they would say, "Aren't you afraid of dying?" And I got to the point where I was just like, "No," because in some ways, I was seeing the improvements in my family, the closeness I was having with my wife. I remember my son, he's so bright, he's amazing. My oldest son, he's the one that can actually communicate much more
Right.
than others, and he has seen me meet all types of people. He is, knows I did football. He knows, certain levels of my gifting. He's never like applauded me ever. And one day we're sitting downstairs. I'm watching him eat, right, and like he's just carving it up, and he says, he calls me Baba. He says, Baba, one day I'm going to be like you. I am going to fast just like you, Baba, for 40 days. That might have been one of the most beautiful things. I get choked up thinking about this. So as a person who lost their father at his roughly around his same age, right, who didn't have male role models, who had to essentially make their life and grow up very quick, right? Like it touched me. It touched me that my oldest son, the one who looks just like me, who is saying, I want to be like you, not because of football, not because of where I think your intelligence is, but because you are fasting, you are depriving yourself for our family. He gets it. And man, I forgot the question that you asked, you know, but
Well, you answered the better question.
oh,
Um, I mean, Russ, you said if family, there's a massive focus here. I mean, we touched on it a little bit before we went live, but uh, how do you view this? It's so interesting, this idea of being a football player, an American football player,
mhm,
um, as a career, and then transitioning out of it. It's unlike other. It's unique in terms of careers or professions,
mhm,
in terms of how dramatic that change can be, um, both intentionally and unintentionally. A lot of times, for players, it can be unintentional, or they get an injury or something, and then it just ends. Um, how has your experience with that transition been, and particularly from a perspective of family and time being able to spend with your family?
oh, that's a good question. I miss the locker room. I really miss. I miss. men getting together, having a goal, right? Because we huddle up, right? We huddle up. The quarterback essentially disseminates whatever the play is, right? We have a goal, right? And our opposition, they also have a goal, right? And their goal is to stop us, right? The defense, their goal is to stop us, like, while I'm on offense, right? And football was an opportunity to practice that every single day for 10, 12 hours a day, right? So I miss that. I miss the locker rooms. I miss, achieving things and seeing your achievement in real time. It's sports is much more linear, as opposed to life, which is exponential. Certain things happen and can change all the time. And I, you talk to George, and George McHale, my brother-in-law. He's talked a lot about the social layer, of Bitcoin. We spend a lot of time, working on that. And we've both had our challenges. And look, I read The Sovereign Individual, like most Bitcoiners, right? And I'm very impressed, with a future where there can be technological advancements, right, and the rise of a digital currency in a decentralized society. But I worry sometimes, right, that perhaps there are too many ideals of anarchy and libertarianism or advocating for individual sovereignty, right? Maybe those things take too much of the forefront. Now, I'm with it, man. When it comes to minimal government interference, I'm with that, right? But I also want to recognize the challenges, right? That I think trying to solely discuss empowering the individual, right, can have. And I keep going back to my family's understanding. And my family is they're modern in what's modernly called Nigeria, right? And but we hold traditions and migration patterns throughout the entire continent, right? And I grew up appreciating the beauty of the part of my American heritage and experience. But I think there are values which can be gleaned from cultures outside, right, of the U.S. And I think that's something which goes is often missed, or it's not a perspective I would like to see, as much, right? Like I've been thinking a lot through, obviously with proper context here, the idea of a state or a consortium of states, right? They're operating as these distinct territories. And I come from something which is more of a tribe, where
Right.
This tribe is not like a state where it has this kind of sovereign polity, right? But instead, a tribe is a social and ethnic, if not political, cohesive group of people, right? So I've been wrestling with this concept of this tribal function, right, state versus the sovereign individual thing, right? Because while the sovereign individual seeks autonomy and self-governance and freedom, right, all things which are valuable, um, a tribal society like also functions from a decentralized form of power, right? And you can also build up a sense of personal agency and independence, which at the same time aligns itself with the ideas of the sovereign individual, right? So I mean, I can riff on that, but when I think about making this change, I see many people are in the Bitcoin space as family, if not closer than my blood family, right? And I think that's something which needs to be tapped into. These are things that can only happen by humans coming together, right? I hate when people confuse the idea of an audience, in a community. I hate it, right? Because a community requires people to truly be together. Right? I love what you're doing in Nashville, by the way. I want to make sure I recognize that, right? Because you understand human interaction, right? There's things that cannot be done without that, right? And like, I think we need more of that.
You should come visit with your family. I'll pick you up from the airport and we'll show you firsthand.
How many car seats do you have?
We can We can make it work. I have at least 2 car seats.
All right, all right. Let's get
Um,
it.
my co-founder at the park, Rod, has he's on the verge of having a basketball team worth of children. So
Ooh.
very family oriented over here in Nashville. I, you know, I've thought about that perspective a lot, um, on like the sovereign individual thesis and families and tribes and local communities. And I think when you empower individuals, I think it's it's inherently a grassroots, bottom up philosophy and process, and and it inherently empowers uh, families. It empowers the family unit. It empowers local communities. It empowers tribes, um, rather than this overarching, centralized,
Mhm.
naturally trending to corrupt, uh, you know, large governance body that is nation state governance right now. And I think the result is a much better world. It's hard to kind of, if you've lived in a world, if you lived in the existing world, particularly in the developing world. I mean, there's still places in the world where local communities and tribes kind of come first. It's hard to really fathom what that kind of world looks like, but that's how humanity has existed for the overwhelming majority of our existence. And it only seems natural that we'd go back to, um, at least something that looks similar, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's wow, that was wonderfully said. There's another comment I kind of want to make on top of that because I feel like it's worth being acknowledged.
Go for it.
Um, did you see that video? I just saw this video today of this guy who might have like essentially lost his pension. At least that's how it was being framed. Did you see that video?
No, I have not watched it, but I
Okay. Well, it's essentially this guy, who they're in some type of warehouse. I recall, and he's upset, right, about some pension reductions. And I think I can't remember where I saw it on whose page it was. And he's just he's cursing, and people are posting it like, this is what happens, when people depend on pensions their entire lives, and the companies which were supposed to be investing their pensions, mismanaged funds, etc., whatever. And at first glimpse, when I saw that video, I thought about it the same way. But now, as I kind of reflect on it, particularly in light of our conversation that we're having right now, is there is when I went back to the village in Nigeria, I noticed most people don't have pensions. Most people don't have insurance. Their pensions, their insurance is their neighbor. It's the people that live next to them. Right. So when we talk about, essentially this communal responsibility, right, or tribes, right, having this a strong sense of communal responsibility, like they're baked into that can be mutual aid. Right. And if you can build this sense of interdependence, right, you can encourage individuals to exercise their sovereignty in ways that benefit the collective. Right. And you can foster, right, through leadership, of course, right, a balance between personal freedom and communal well-being. And I just think these are things which, I think have historically been thought about in black or white, right? Nobody wants to get into the nuance. They just want to tag
right.
something with a certain level of framing, right? But I think there's an incredible opportunity right now, with the level of fanaticism, in Bitcoin to build cultural sovereignty. Right? We can build that now because you mentioned earlier, that you weren't a spiritual person. I want to push back on you on that, right? Because when I think about why is Bitcoin captivated me so deeply, right? And how is it that this technology and lines of code, right, have, they have had this power, right? And I think is because Bitcoin fundamentally, within its rules, mirrors a natural experience. It's the human experience cyclically, which we go through forever and ever, right? For years and thousands of years. So there's a term called biomimicry, right? And are you familiar with that term?
Yes.
Yeah. So for those listening, bios means life, and mimesis means to imitate, right? So most of you know the greatest technologies, whether it's like certain the aerodynamics of planes or even Velcro, right? Like these things ultimately came from man observing nature, right? And then building the or fashioning things, to build technology, right? And when I think about Bitcoin, it fits that same ethos, right? So what we're experiencing, those who are awake and who understand what Bitcoin can be, right? Not just as a function of money, but as a protocol, right? Like that is a spiritual moment. That is it, right? So I think if you get Bitcoin, right, particularly from the level I've heard you eloquently communicate, Matt, right, sir, you are on that journey, just like all of us are. We're all on this journey, So again, I'm being long-winded, but I'm excited to talk to you. I don't know if you can tell.
The feeling is mutual, brother. I mean, I guess my point is that I am very much learning, and I'm very much um, in a process of improvement on that front. Um, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, my wife is not. My wife is incredibly spiritual and very connected. And I'm just constantly trying to uh, do better for myself and for her and our family. And I just it's just something that I do battle with. Just that constant improvement, and just like this idea of, for better or for worse, what we both got ourselves wrapped up in, which is this society that is dominated by social media and being connected, and the dopamine hits of notifications and having your phone on. Um, like, I mean, we're talking about a 40-day fast, not eating food and only consuming water for 40 days. Like, how much of America can do a 40-day fast of social media or their cell phone? Just turn off their cell phone for 40 days.
Yeah.
And I don't know the last time I turned off my cell phone for 40 days. So it's important for me to keep myself in check and humble in that way, that I probably should, but I haven't. And why haven't I? And where do my priorities lie, and where do I take it from there, right?
Yeah. Well, can I make it practical?
Yeah,
I
go
think
for it.
sometimes
I like practical.
Okay.
Practical's
Okay.
good.
Thank you. So let's say I think sometimes when people are mentioning spiritual things, it almost feels like it's it's you're holier than thou, or you're it's just kind of woo woo type of ordeal. But I want to put it in practical terms, and I think this can be helpful for many people. Because I've been working through this concept, and it came to me in the last couple of days in the fast, particularly as I was having watching my family eat, and I'm there. We eat together, right?
Right.
So whether we're eating or not, we're always sitting at the table. My wife and the kids and whoever's at our house, we're going to sit at the table. We don't. It's not. It's never. You go over here. You go over here. Like no, we sit together. We commune. And I had this thought. I said, well, I think the most sacred space, right, in a person's home is the kitchen. And like, let's just think about this for a moment, right? There's an act of preparing sustenance for yourself and your loved ones, right? That's an offering. That's a sacred ritual that connects us to our primal nature, right? So, like, okay, I'm gonna see if I can reframe this. Imagine this: like, in a kitchen, there are pots and pans, there are utensils and spices, right? And this operates as this sacred altar where the essence of your life, like your effort, your labor, your resources are all being transformed into an edible dish, right? And like I really want to kind of like hone in on this, right? For those who are listening, and if you're like me, you got your podcast on like 2x, right? I want you to slow down and hear this because I think I think this is an important key, right? Is in the kitchen, stories unfold, right? It's where generations of people, my mother or a grandmother, they whisper their wisdom, right? They give you their ancestors' traditions and they're woven into every fabric of the recipe, right? The kitchen is where laughter and tears and celebration and you go through all of life's rhythms. Right? And I actually have memories that are infused into everything that I've eaten. Right? Like there are things in which are very euphoric for me. Right? And to me, that is the spirit, right? That is right. Those experiences, right? The understanding that in this realm, and by I mean this realm, I mean the kitchen, right? It's where sustenance becomes sustenance for the soul. And I think for anyone who has a child can understand this, right? That it is a sacred service, a gesture, right? When you feed your children, it does something to you, right? It reminds you of this interdependence that exists in our society, and I think it's possible for anyone to live in that. Anyone, right? When you're in the kitchen, you're in a sacred place because you're communing, right? And the community is a sacred act, whether it's from plate all the way to seed, right? It involves our efforts, our labor, our essence. So I want to encourage you and anybody listening, you know, we are spiritual people, right? But we're dealing with much more than we can actually see. And forgive me, I'm imposing my own ideas, but I hope that it helps somebody.
Well, we're all here to listen to your ideas, so
Thank you for the floor, man. Usually in sports interviews they cut you off, and you got somebody like in the back.
you're forgiven. Yeah, I'm not going to ask you about the play. That was a great play. Like, obviously, what else are you going to say?
All right, one more thing though, and like
That's funny. Sports interviews.
I,
Continue.
I've seen what you've been saying in regard to the blue check stuff, man.
Oh, really?
Dude, you're right. You're absolutely right. like, I think it's going to be horrible, right? What can ultimately come from this, right? And like, I got a blue check,
I'm aware.
right? I know you're aware. You know what? I knew you weren't going to give me a passport, so I'm bringing it up first. But look, right here's the reality, right? Is I think in Bitcoin, right now, at least in the industry, I think we got to figure out ways to reach across the aisle, right? Like we need leadership in a different form of ways, right? And like in some ways, man, I'm taking this blue check, so my kids don't need to take a blue check, right? Like
Respect.
like I don't want them to be online, to be honest with you, right? So for me, like there are things in which it benefits people. The algorithm can benefit people and things which can be built on. And I just hope that people can see the real me. They don't just see the blue check, right? Like I'm going to make this thing work for as best as I can, because I know that ultimately I'm building a community, right, of people, right, and they can benefit from the things that I can put my attention and my effort to, right. So I respect people on both sides, you know. I respect people who are doing the blue check thing, and who aren't. I respect people on all ends, man. And thanks for giving me that pass, bro.
I was not going to bring it up.
Well, okay. Well,
I kind of want to talk about. I mean, you said it. You'd rather your children not be on the internet.
mhm,
And this is something that I wrestle with. Social media addiction, all the negatives of our digital connected lives, and the addiction we have to the little computer in our pocket, the little surveillance device in our pocket.
mhm,
But then also the power of freedom tech and the power of being a part of that movement, and not wanting our children to be completely unequipped for the world that comes. I mean, if we think that we're digitally connected now, I don't think we can really fathom what 20 years in the future looks like, or 40 years in the future looks like. How do you balance? Like, how do you think about that?
it's a good question. Um, it's a hard question, and one that I like to wrestle with every day. And we've done a pretty good job, keeping the children away from screens and technology. We got rid of our television. The most they see our phones is like when we're on it, my wife and I. But we've also noticed, now that we have limited our screen time, the amount of the conversations we have. Like, we homeschool our children, so we're the ones educating them. So everything is interactive, it's hands on.
Right.
We're constantly more dealing with people. Because I think when you say yes, to using more digital technologies, you're saying no to physical interaction. And I understand, people see Bitcoin as this, internet native currency, and I think it has its place. I'm not going to, not acknowledge, right, that we are looking at essentially a digital form of technology that can be used, but I think it's meant to just be used, and not the other way around. We don't want to allow it to use us. So I really believe this takes a certain level of discipline, and we made commitments. At least one day we honor the Sabbath, one day out of the week, no technology, everything's off. And man, it has been incredible. And I'm going to offer you the same invite. If you and your wife are ever out here, come stay with us, man. We turn everything off, and we have a good time, and we color, we paint, things I haven't done since I've been a child, man. We find ways to have fun, right? And to do what we used to do as children, right? When things were so much more simple. So I'm still learning, man. And if you have any tips, I'll take some from you too.
I'm learning from you on this front. We're definitely going to take you up on that offer. It means a lot.
You're welcome, man. We have extra
Um,
space. You can stay with us if you like.
I've been wanting to meet we've both been wanting to meet your family for a while now.
Yeah,
I mean, I try not to get personal on the show, but it was really special how we met. The first time me and you met was also the first time you met my wife. My wife was with me. We met you together,
yeah,
um, for the Indy 500, with Jack Mallers
yeah.
and the Bitcoin car. That was a crazy fucking whirlwind.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was my first time going to a racing event, um, which is it's it's a weird way to experience a whole sport for the first time. Um, like at the top, I mean, we were in we
Yeah.
were we were on the track, you know, we're in the owner's suite. Um, it kind of just sets like this super high bar. And then you just if you go to a racing event after that, you're like, oh wow, I peaked on my first time.
Yeah.
Um,
Did you remember when I was I kind of thought like all professional sports are the same. So like we go down to what's that area called? Where like they have the pit stops and all that type of
yeah,
stuff.
the pit.
Yeah, and like what was the other bank that was it PBC Bank?
It was PNC.
PNC Bank, and I see their driver, and like I just start talking trash to him, and I'm thinking like that's what people do, like you talk trash to the opposing team, like to kind of get in their head and to get them out their game, and like everybody was looking at me like, why are you talking trash to this dude? I'm like, isn't this what people do? And he was upset, like he
That's
was
funny.
he was pissed, and like and I remember like one of the owners took me aside. It's like, hey, this isn't football. Like we don't really do that here.
Yeah, it is interesting, the different sports and
Yeah,
how
it was pretty funny.
the different, cultures that they have. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that was anyway, to me, to our family, it was always special that, my wife and I met you at the same time.
Without a
Um,
doubt. Without a
and
doubt.
we
You
always
two are
remember that.
special people. You're very
Um,
special.
thank you, sir. Um, I, so I mean, can we just dive a little bit into, like, like, the actual experience of not eating food for 40 days? I mean, your family was still eating. You were sitting at the dinner table together, which, by the way, I think is a, um, relatively low lift, massive life improvement to insist
Mhm.
on that
Yep.
at the very least. Um, what was what was the hardest part? I mean, like, what did you do? You were literally just sitting there while they ate around you. Did that make it more difficult? Did that make it easier?
Yeah, I think the first couple of days, like so, really, I would say for anybody who likes to kind of go about it, this, they want to fast. The first 4 days are the hardest, and after that, you really don't have any challenges. But conceptually, like food is a cornerstone to most community gatherings, right? So when I'm sitting at the table with my family, they're eating those first couple of days, man. And my kids are always hungry. They're big boys. Like they're always hungry, so I'm always feeding in my hand. And like I got to the point where I had to tape my mouth shut because I would be feeding them, and like they drop something, you just kind of eat it,
Right.
right? You don't like so I had to like tape my mouth shut, and then everything smells good, and the body is just like crying out and saying, "Feed me," and you just like I wanted to be in control. Like I wanted to dictate things to my body. So a lot of it's mental, right? And there are some physical challenges. You get headaches. You'll deal with bouts of frustration. You, know, um, you can be irritable. And then all the while, you're losing weight, right? There are periods in which you go through acidosis. So you know, you'll have these moments where you lose a ton of energy. You can't do anything, and then you make a turn and you have all the energy in the world. It's a crazy experience what the body can do, man. I'm increasingly more impressed, right, with what I think our abilities are, but it's I wish I could say it's easy, but like I think sometimes it depends on what do you want more. Like I knew I wanted something for my family and for myself, right, and for the world, right. So I really had to hold on to these things. I had to, I had to build accountability systems around me. People that I said that I would reach out to certain people and I would say, "Hey, I need you to encourage me. Because there's going to come a point in time where I'm going to feel like giving up, and I'm going to say, "This is dumb. This is stupid." So that's another thing. So one is build accountability systems. Right. The second thing is recognize that your body is going to change. Right. You are, at least for the first couple of days, you're essentially addicted. Right. The amount of ways in which we consume at the pace we consume, like, you're a foodaholic. Right. So, what do they say that the first step to any form of recovery is, you have to admit, right, that this is a challenge. Right. So you know it's admission, that food, right, does, and consumption does have power over us. Right. It's essentially another form of God, right, that exists within our bellies. You know, and then the third thing is, enjoy the ride. Because on the other side, you know how much clarity you receive when you're not bogging yourself down with food. I didn't realize how much time I spend eating or preparing to eat. Right, whether that is groceries or trying to figure out what we're going to eat. And I'll say this, and for anybody who feels this way, asking my wife to eat what she wants to eat is one of the worst things ever. What do you want to eat? I don't know. What do you want to eat? Like, you know how much time you spend going back and forth trying to figure out what you want. Anyway, I just threw this in there for her because I know she'll listen later. But yes, enjoy the ride.
But you got to skip that process because you weren't eating
Yeah,
40 days.
right. Yeah. So then she's like, she was still asking me, what should we eat? I'm like, I don't know. What do you want to eat?
I'm not participating.
I'm not doing it. Go ahead. You guys figure it out. So she still wants an answer, but it's all good.
I try and honor questions I see in the live chat, and now we have 2 dueling live chats right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I'm not looking at live chat. I apologize.
You're good. I'm looking at it. Someone asked, like, how you spent your days if you weren't eating, which is crazy. I mean, I think a lot of people do build their days around when they're having food.
Without a doubt, man.
Like, were you still working out? Were you still lifting? I know that was a major part of your life. Has always been a major part of your life. Like, how were you spending the days?
Yeah, I would still, so in the mornings I would get up, so I'm getting up roughly like 5, sometimes 4:30 a.m. And I would try to spend some personal time just reflecting on, like, anything which I've had challenges on, in the past, or, maybe what I'm presently looking at, and then the kids wake up anywhere between like 6 and 6:30. But actually I tried to, like I wanted to work out, so for the first 20 days, I was getting after it, so cardio, weightlifting, and I would do it in moderation, walking. In some ways, sprinting and jogging. Like, I kept a pretty active lifestyle because I knew I needed to sweat. Like, I could feel these toxins coming out of me, right? So, like, I wanted to really, circulate the blood flow. I think it's, important to do those type of things. And then the second thing is, like, I know people assume that, hey, I played in NFL and I don't work, right? I don't have things that I'm building, and that's a complete fallacy. Like, I'm still building. I am still, you know, uh, I still have a commitment, right, to the world, right, to the family, to generate income and to stack more sats. Like, I'm still very responsible for that. So, like, there is no laying down all day and feeling sorry about myself, because I'm not eating. And so really, I would orient my days around, one, taking time to reflect, right? Obviously the family component, which I've been hammering on, and building And then lastly, just there's a lot of prayer, man. There's a lot of looking inwardly, at nighttime. I didn't really sleep too well, during these fasts. I don't know what it is, that I think there are, maybe by scientific means, because you're not eating so much and burning so much food, you probably don't need as much rest. So I was very energized at nights. So I kept things going pretty well. At least for the first 20 days. After that first we hit, I remember I hit day 23, and I was tanking bad.
At day 23.
Yeah.
Was that to be expected? Is that
Well, for me, it's been a challenge, and both of my two long-term fasts, day 23. I don't know what it is about that day. It's always been very challenging.
well, I mean, I don't obviously this is not based in science since you survived. But I've always heard the 3 minutes without air, uh oh, was it oh, no, 3 weeks without water, 3 months without food. So I
Mhm.
guess you were drinking water the whole time.
Yeah.
Um, but I wonder if there's a connection there, 3 weeks, and 3 weeks without water, you die.
Man,
Oh, no, 3 days without
3 days ago.
it's 3 minutes, 3 days, and 3 weeks, I thought was the law of threes, that if you don't have food for 3 weeks, that's when you start deteriorating.
I think, yeah, I know some people who've done a dry fast for 7 days.
No water even?
No water, no water. And I mean, this is like, it's so hard right now to get accurate information.
Yeah,
Like
that's true.
fiat science is real.
Mhm.
Like we looked at, we're looking at the situation which happened in COVID, and there are people on both sides of the spectrum. But I think something that I think both sides are acknowledging, those who are pro and against, is that we need to take a deep look, a very deep look at how our medical system works. And I would even say, if anybody um, wants to do more research on this, like go back, study Pasteur and Beauchamp, right? Study them, right? And Matt, like there's like the whole Tesla Edison debate, right?
Of course.
And it's essentially a rivalry which has become a symbol, right, for a clash between like innovation and like what the establishment is. So while like Tesla was known for its pioneering work in like alternating currency and electricity systems, wire, less communication, and all these other kind of groundbreaking things. Edison was thought about, more as an inventor who was very politically inclined, right, and took a different approach in regards to electrical distribution, right. And there's the same type of concept, right, built into the medical system, where it's called germ theory, but versus biological terrain, and it's a debate between two men and ultimately two ideologies. Really known as the Pasteur versus Beauchamp debate. And I without grossly simplifying it, right? Pasteur was known as a person who believed in this kind of germ theory for disease, and he proposed it as essentially a external germs and microbes, they invade the body, ultimately causing various illnesses, right? And to combat these germs, you know, we see what we see now is many pharmaceutical interventions like drugs, vaccinations, and surgeries, et cetera, et cetera. While versus Beauchamp, right, he held a different perspective, suggesting that there are these small particles called microsomas and in cells, which ultimately change form and function, right? And can exist or become toxic, right, in an unhealthy body terrain. So that instead of seeing germs as bad or evil, right, you see germs or bacteria as opportunistic, right, and it's a way in which the body, right, can push out weaknesses or certain imbalances. And so I'm not going to sit here and argue whether there is for or against a traditional form of medicine. But I just want to let people know, right, that these debates that we've had, particularly when it comes to the medical industry now, like these things have been going on for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, right? And I think we want to be very careful, right, in terms of our understanding of where many of these ideologies come from, and then ultimately what they end up growing into. So when I think about dry fasting, like I know people who they dry fasted for a week, right? Like versus, and I thought the same thing. Like nobody can live without water for 3 days, and it's just not true. People can, So okay, I finally looked at the chat. Somebody made a Mandibles shout out. Yeah, I love Mandibles. It's a great book.
Also love Mandibles.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good book. Really good book.
But yeah, they were the Diogenes the Great was clarifying what I was saying, which was 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food.
Mm.
I've heard that many times in my life.
Mm.
I mean, clearly, I will say that I relate with that. It's incredibly difficult to do your own research in terms of medical science and nutrition and all the associated fields. There's just so much ingrained bias everywhere, and it's hard to dig through that and come to your own conclusions. But it's imperative that people do.
Yes, man. And then it's actually something I want to ask you that I'm really trying to work through. And you would have much more of an understanding of the technical components. And let's think about, and I'm bringing this up based on what you're saying. So trust me, I have somewhere I'm going with this. But like this whole thing about ordinals, I think is very interesting.
Okay.
Like, what's your perspective, right, in terms of like where like a lot of the pushback from ordinals is coming from? Like, I'm just trying to understand it, right? So I'm as much I have to learn about it, right? But it's my understanding that like I thought Bitcoiners want the free market to work, right? And they're all for you know, uh, uh, you getting things out into the competitive marketplace, right? So I'm just trying to like work through that, and like maybe because I haven't been in some of these rooms, but like I heard the pod you did with that is that
With
Casey?
Casey?
Yeah, I heard that. I listened to it, you know, and you seem to be very balanced, right, in your perspective. I don't know if that's where you still stand, but like I'm just kind of curious to know, like, after that conversation, like where has your mind been at?
Citadel Dispatch 91 with Casey Rod Armor, the creator of Ordinals. It's really interesting because Casey came up with it, but Casey's kind of at least taken a step back publicly from the project.
Mm-hmm.
And partially because of like who it's been captured by. And I think that's where a lot of people have issues. Ordinals is a little bit interesting because, first of all, I did not think we were going to be talking about this today.
No, me neither. Me neither. But I was just like, I like
So
you have a great perspectives,
fair enough. It's interesting because it's really two separate things, right? So you have something called inscriptions, where you can encode whatever data you want to encode into the Bitcoin blockchain. If we're correct about Bitcoin, the Bitcoin blockchain will outlive us all. So I think there is merit. Maybe merit's the wrong word, but there is data that people are going to want to inscribe in this ledger that lasts forever, that they think has value. And there's a free market that dictates whether or not they can inscribe that in the ledger, and that's the fee market. And if they're willing to pay the Bitcoin required for the transaction fee to inscribe that data, then there's nothing we can do to stop it.
Okay.
That's the beauty of Bitcoin, right? It can be used without permission. There's no gatekeepers. There's no central authority. And as a result, people can inscribe data on the chain. Ordinals is this separate theory that Casey came up with to basically denote ownership of the different inscriptions, and as a result, be able to transfer ownership of the different inscriptions. He calls it ordinal theory. It does not exist on chain. Is not enforced by the Bitcoin protocol. It's completely separate of Bitcoin itself. It is essentially this numbering scheme that they came up with and agreed with in terms of who owns which inscription. But naturally, in the way Bitcoin works, you can inscribe that data on chain, but you can't transfer ownership of that data. Everyone has access to that data.
Okay.
So
Okay.
my issues mostly stem from people trying to sell ownership of different data objects. I mean, the most common case is NFTs, or like some kind of artwork. And they sell it via this ordinal mechanism, and I just don't think there's actually any ownership transfer. And I think that a lot of people do it in scammy ways in terms of trying to sell someone an item that really can't be transferred ownership wise. So it's mostly my issue, like mostly stems from the promoters, and who has kind of gravitated towards it. But I do think I think there's some novel uses for inscriptions that we kind of haven't really seen yet, because it's mostly been focused on dumping garbage on people. And that is just the reality that you have to kind of come to grips with if you're involved in the greater freedom tech movement in general, which is that when you have tools that promote freedom, you will find a lot of like-minded individuals that care about individual freedom, but you'll also find a lot of malicious actors who will take advantage of the freedom that provides to try and take advantage of other people. And it's just the unfortunate reality. Like, that is just the reality you have to live in, and you kind of have to take the bad with the good. Otherwise, you won't get the good part. And I think the good part massively outweighs the bad part. And I mean, we see this with Bitcoin too. We've heard it many times in the past. Bitcoin has kind of grown up past this, but I expect it to happen many times in the future as Bitcoin gets adopted, which is you pick a particular individual or group and they're using Bitcoin for something that you disagree with or might be illegal. And you try and paint a large swath on all Bitcoin users, and you say, if this terrorist group is using this money, that it's not freedom money, it's terrorist money. But at the end of the day, freedom money can be used by anybody without permission. And the overwhelming majority of people are using it to benefit their lives and are using it in a objectively moral way, or I don't even know if there's such a thing as objectively moral, but that are using it in a positive way and a force for good. But some bad actors will still use it, right? And maybe that ratio is skewed very differently in the inscriptions and ordinals world, where the majority of early adoption has at least been, and maybe that's the key. Maybe the key is with these tools, a lot of times the early adoption is by malicious actors. And you don't really see the positive adoption until later on.
Right. And I just kind of want to kind of stand on this so maybe people can understand what I think about it.
Yeah, hit us.
Like, I want to see the space grow, and I say the space Bitcoin grow. Right. So I think this involves less purity tests, right? Less of the infighting, right, and more education and evangelism, even if it's on different forms. Right. And I think we need more leadership in this area. Right. And ultimately, fasting has helped open my eyes, right, to this reality. And like, I come from the sports world, right? So I've had exposure, to a world of collectibles. I understand why, like, people like these inscriptions or ordinals, and they're popular. And I get it. It's triggering for many people who are purist, right, or consider themselves purists. But I'm actually excited about people working on Bitcoin, because I think free markets ultimately end up winning, and I think there's an opportunity to start trying to capture what I think has always been wasted market share, and bring people more in, right, in different ways. And even going back to like what I think about, what I was saying about Pasteur and Beauchamp and these two lines of thinking, like let's just consider like the hieroglyphs, right, in Egypt in the pyramids, right? The hieroglyphs were seen as this system of writing, right, or using pictorial symbols to represent words, sounds, or ideas, right? And um, they were also meant to serve as a documentation of historical events, whether it's religious beliefs or people's way of life, right? And hieroglyphs were a permanent and distributed ledger. Okay, and I see the Bitcoin blockchain working the same way. It's this decentralized and mutable ledger, right? So when a person like Beauchamp and all his ideas are essentially erased from history, right? Like, can you imagine his ideas living on top of literally the best, blockchain in the world? Like, can you imagine a host or a network of computers distributed across the world to verify what has transpired and happened in chronological order? Right? And I think that's the beauty of something else Bitcoin can offer, right? Is it is this information storage that can withstand the test of time and preserve valuable data for future generations. Our libraries, right? And I say us, I mean people like you and me, Matt, who love this space. The blockchain will be our libraries, right? These things will exist if we believe Bitcoin is what people say it is. Like, we got to put our hieroglyphics on the wall, so I don't actually know what that looks like, specifically for me, but I think it's worth some consideration. I do think people should think about it,
Yeah, like
and go
we
ahead.
have similar perspectives there. I mean, I tend to agree. That's why I say, um, I don't think the positive use cases have really been explored much. It's mostly the at this current early stage of adoption, it's been mostly malicious actors, in my opinion, and that's my read. And I would say, just as a pushback in terms of this idea of big tents and being more welcoming and less purity tests. I mean, the purity tests are um, can be very infuriating at times. I
Mhm,
would say I think that is larger than Bitcoin. It's part of this internet culture that has
mhm,
developed where it's not a neighbor talking to a neighbor or someone shaking someone else's hand and looking them in the eye. It's a stranger holding a high standard that they're not even holding themselves to some
mhm.
stranger on the internet,
Yeah.
and getting engagement points off of that, and it's very common. But if we're moving to a world with more freedom tech and more freedom and more independence and more free markets and less overreaching, centralized, corrupt governance, then we're also going back to a world where people need to self-police more and operate in high integrity and um, stand up and say something if they think something's unfair. And I think, f depending maybe the pendulum has swung a little bit in terms of, the quote unquote "crypto industry" and the industry at large, maybe bigger than Bitcoin. Um, but for the overwhelming history of Bitcoin and then crypto, it's actually been the opposite. Most of the time, anyone that has any kind of platform or any kind of audience or any kind of voice or influence in the space has tend to turn a blind eye when malicious actors fleece naive new users.
Mm,
Um, and it's like a you scratch my back, I scratch your back, and we all make a lot of money, and the average person gets fucked. And I think if anything, there's probably a shortage of larger voices that are willing to call out and keep honest, other large voices in this space that tend to focus on trying to take advantage of people. And that's kind of the balancing act to try and find. Um, it's something that I take quite seriously, um, because I like to focus on things that other people aren't doing, to make my short time on this world worth it. But yeah, I like if you believe in free markets, if you believe in free markets, then you objectively do not believe in something like the SEC deciding on what people can invest in.
All
Um,
facts.
right. So then the alternative um, is trying to provide quality information to people so that they can make an educated decision on their own. And I think the way the incentives are set up, um, the way incentives in general are set up in terms of making money in this space, um, it tends to be that people aren't willing to put their own neck on the line to try and call out outright scams and frauds, and we need more people doing that, and that's the balance, kind of. That
Right.
makes any sense.
I wonder if sort of calling some of these concepts out. Maybe there's a way to. I don't want to frame this. Maybe there's a way. Maybe the best way to call them out is to build something better,
Yeah.
right? Because when I think about this sort of this free market of you know it's a free market of ideas, right, and ideology as well, right? Like we are competing for the minds of people,
Right.
and I think that's something that we need to pay attention to is these traditional players and what people frame as centralized systems. They have a very large market share, and the bandwidth of most people, right? So like we have to be much more crafty, right, and intelligent about how we want to deliver things. I've actually seen beautiful things being built,
Right.
right, but they can't get any liquidity. They can't get
Right.
anybody to pay attention to their project, right? So I think we need to think much more, creatively about some of these problems, and I think that's where the leadership comes from. That's what I've seen from you, Matt. When you brought Casey on, like I didn't know who else was I going to listen to, right? I'm going to listen to you because I know, you're going to give him the right platform to say what he needs to say, right? And I'm not saying you need to agree with him, right? But your delivery and your approach to it, it wasn't, hey, this is dumb, this is against big. No, it's an attack. No, it was say what did you say. You push back, where you needed to, right? But ultimately, the free market's going to decide what it needs to decide. And I think the issue is so many Bitcoiners forget how much they know, and then they assume everyone else gets it.
Right.
But most people are far from getting it. Right? And they forget about the mantra in which you say every day. Actually, I don't know if you still say it every day. Right? Stay humble.
Continue.
Right? Yeah, I was going to say, stay humble. Stay humble. That's the mantra. Stay humble.
Yeah, I mean, I stopped. I did it 279 days in a row, and then I got frustrated with Twitter's new policies, and I decided I don't want to support the platform anymore with the daily mantra.
Well, I love it.
I still live it every day, I'll tell you that much, and I hope other people do as well. And it's not me saying that I am humble. It's me reminding myself that I need to stay humble. To the haters out there who say that I'm not humble, I'm aware. I'm working on it.
I know that it takes different forms, man. It takes different forms.
But Russ, like I know like our time is coming close here, but a couple more things. The other balance is that, like I think that I think humanity trends to freedom long term. I think people will trend to freedom tech naturally when they realize the need for it. But the way I kind of look at it is another balancing act is that the natural tendency is to get burned and touch the stove and feel pain, and that's when you realize the need, and this is when this kind of tech gets adopted. And if there's ways for us to avoid that process, and avoid that pain before the benefits, that is obviously advantageous. Like I would prefer a world where less people feel pain in order to reach a better place. And I think that's what I try and balance with almost this idea of there's almost like there's this undercurrent within specifically the Bitcoin community that can be quite paternalistic, where it's like, um, where instead of letting your child learn on his own, it's do this, and then when they ask you why, you say because I say so,
Mm.
which I think can be counterintuitive and not very helpful. And I try and, I don't know, be as productive as possible in those constraints. On the positive side, in terms of tools and solutions, it would behoove me to I don't even know if I use that phrase right. I don't know, whatever. It would I need to bring up with you before we end. Are you familiar at all with Noster?
Dude, it's been across my dashboard, but like I haven't really like dove into it really deep. Like I know what are these guys that just got their I got their node, man. I wanted to support them. And I'm not affiliate. I'm not invested with this company at all. But shout out to Start9. You know that I think they're doing some good work. I think a lot of people are doing good work. You know, but that was like the first time I saw like Noster on something. So like I don't even know like how to get set up. There's such a disparity in regards to the information, you know, of onboarding that I don't conceptually get. But you know, one thing I do is I love it's open source. I love that there are ways to move users seamlessly from, you know, I guess app to app, right? And that is going to open a realm of new possibilities. But like I'm looking to learn more.
So, you're on iPhone, right?
Yeah, well, both. I'm on multiple things, as
Well,
as I've learned from you on your privacy website.
there you go. Well, on iPhone, if you go to primal.net/downloads, they have an iPhone test flight of their Noster app.
Mhm.
I think that's a good place to start. You basically just install the app and then follow the steps to create a key. Similar to Bitcoin, you get a private key. Everyone knows you by the public key.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, Nostr is this like amazing interoperable communication protocol that's permissionless, similar to Bitcoin in that way. That's completely open source that people can build on top of, so apps can communicate with each other using this standard. It can be used for many, many different things. I mean, I think a lot of the ways Nostr will be used, we can't really even comprehend yet. But humans love social media. So one of the major first use cases of it is essentially creating an interoperable competitor to Twitter, to Instagram, to TikTok, to Reddit, all using the same standard, but how they render different posts and whatnot are based on the social media they're competing with. So what does that mean? That means that we can have a broadcast medium, we can have a social media that is not controlled by an individual company, that cannot be pressured by governments, that cannot force you to do identity verification to have reach, that has Bitcoin payments directly built in so that you can get payments directly without a middleman and free to money. So the left hand part of our screen right now is this Noster enabled live chat,
Okay.
which you can get at citadel-dispatch.com/stream. It uses this service called zap.stream. But why do I bring this up? I bring this up because the guy who created it, the two guys who created it, or at least led the creation of zap.stream, Kieran and Carnage, basically had this open protocol, and they were able to build out this service that we're using live on air right now in a matter of days because they didn't require permission from anyone, and it's censorship resistance by default, and it's open, and the power that that can bring is pretty substantial. So as much as I complain about Elon's policies, as much as I complain about uh, the past regime's policies when they were in charge of Twitter and all the shadow bans that they did, and now the shadow bans that Elon's doing on anyone who doesn't verify their identity. I do it from a place of optimism and a place of hope, because the reason I care that Twitter is making these policies is because I've always thought of Twitter as a platform that, even though centralized, and even though it has its own trade-offs and issues, a platform that promotes freedom, that promotes new thought, that promotes open discussion, and that is waning. But fortunately, we do have a alternative in Noster, and it's very early days of Noster. It's just been incredibly impressive watching it get built out by open source contributors around the world. The dev mind share is absolutely crazy. So I would just suggest you check it out. No pressure. I think, but I do think that I do think that is the future.
Yeah. Okay. So I would just say, and any of the devs who are working on Noster, like, yo, hit me up. My DMs are open. Like, I'm gonna learn more about like how it works, like what can be done, and ultimately like how I can help this area grow. So I'm down to do a lot more thinking, around there, and like that's the that's what I love about Bitcoin. Is
Yep.
like, like it's all proof of work. Like if you can show me what you're working on, like let's go, right? Like I want to see this industry move ahead. I really do, and I think it sounds like to me, based on what you're saying, Matt, that like technologies like Noster are going to be pivotal, right, to maintaining some form of freedom of speech, which we know is ultimately freedom of thought.
Yeah, I think it's just really complementary with Bitcoin, right? Where Bitcoin is the money protocol and Nostr is the speech protocol, and you need both for a free society. And I mean, there's plenty of situations where wallets and whatnot might, like Bitcoin wallets, might communicate with each other with Nostr and stuff, and you'll see a lot of cross pollination and the two technologies kind of working together to both be more robust on their own.
Mm-hmm.
It's really fucking cool. I mean, talking about proof of work before we wrap, um, you have this website, okungfast.com.
Yeah.
What's your plan with that? What's your plan going forward? What's next for us?
Yeah. So I thought one of my kids is flipped out in the background.
I hear
Yeah. So like just so people know, a lot of like I didn't really plan on being back on social for a long time.
right.
I just wanted to come back on, like do the 40-day fast and say, yo, like I did this, this is why I did it. Like just enjoy, this process, whether you want to include yourself or not, right? It's there so people can see the journey. But I've been getting so much, feedback, right? And it's a lot of people who are very similar to me saying, look, I got kids, or I'm trying to make these lifestyle changes. I'm struggling. Or they're saying, I've been to all these doctors, I've tried all these medicines, and nothing's working. Right? And they're wanting to engage, and it's been, I didn't know what I was doing would be an ultimate gift. So proof of work, right? And my friend, I want to shout him out here. I can't say his name, but he always tells me, mimic and mime the Bitcoin network, right? So if you can take these concepts in Bitcoin, right, and attempt to live them out, like we both know that this technology works, right? And if humans can continue to align themselves, right, with what I'm going to say is a very archaic technology, then things can be better. So, when I created Okung Fast, right, very simply, it was to do that, just that. Is here's proof of work. Like I am going to prove to you that day after day, I am putting this level of discipline in. So I've been thinking about what's next, and we've been talking about maybe leading a 21-day Bitcoiner fast. Like with the halvings coming up next year, I mean, that might be something to consider.
Right.
Because for people who are saying, hey, like I want to fast, 3, 7, 10, 14, 21, whatever. Like maybe just creating a space for them to do it, do it with me. So I'm doing a lot of thinking, through that and trying to ensure that people have the proper resources, as best as I can. And man, I'd really be excited, to have a lot of people who are interested, in taking a very challenging but worthwhile step in life, to do it with us.
That's amazing. 21 days so we don't hit the dreaded 23rd day.
Yeah, for sure.
Make it easy on us. Um really amazing conversation, special conversation, Russ. Thank you for joining us. Um it's really impressive. You're really impressive. You're an inspiration. Um yeah, just as honor and privilege. Massive love to you and your family. Hope to see you guys in person sometime soon. It's been way, way, way too long.
Too long. Too long, man.
And just thank you for joining us. Do you have any final thoughts for the freaks before we wrap?
Yeah, I just want to say, man, you guys have been awesome. Keep up this good work. I think I'm excited about the future. I'm excited about what I think people are capable of, particularly in a world where, I think artificial intelligence is very prevalent, and, everybody's talking about automation and da, 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 right? Like, I think the most powerful form of technology, are humans. And we are we have this divine code embedded within us. So that means the possibilities are endless. We need to build more things like Noster. We are very capable, of doing much more than we could ever dream of and achieve. So I'd like to thank the freaks. Um, Thanks for your support, and I look forward to doing much more in the Bitcoin industry. I'm very excited about it. So thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate you, Russ. Much love. Appreciate you, freaks. Stay humble, stack sats. Cheers.